Hello, everybody. Nice to be here with you, I guess, kind of in a way. And hopefully next year we can be together in live and in person and have a conversation afterwards, which would always solve a lot of things. It's always better to talk to people in my book. Anyway, I have a lot of information for you, both primary and secondary research that we wish to impart because we think it's pretty important at this point, semi-post-COVID. So let's get going. Screen share. So we're going to talk about the store of the future is not a store. And really maybe an even more appropriate title is store of the future is not only a store at this point in time, but there's a lot of data to support the fact that we're going to be moving on from existing platforms to something completely different. And obviously we're going to have fewer stores is something that we know. But let's talk about the future of the physical store. First, a little commercial about the company that I work for. I work for a company called WD Partners at wdpartners.com. We're a global experience design consultancy, and we have end-to-end solutions. And really what that means, if you look from left to right, you see that we do strategy, which is my group predominantly in design. We also have an operations group that right now is on fire because operations at retail, buy online, pick up in store, and how to execute that is a big deal. We do digital. And when we say end-to-end, we can build them and build many of them. And just some data with 300 some people, been in business for 50 years. We have offices, including some foreign offices. And these are some of the clients that we're working with right now. So you absorb that for a second. A lot of good friends on that board right there. And so commercial is over. What we're going to talk about is 2020 very briefly, and we're still kind of close to it. And it's worth mentioning, I think, because it's got us into a much different position in 2021 than we would have imagined in 2019. Everything really got accelerated. Now I'm going to talk about the upside for a little bit as well. And then I'm going to talk about the way forward, which is based on the consumer research that we did, as well as plumped up by some secondary research. So first of all, 2020 kind of looks like this, and it looked like this for everybody. And whether it was you personally, this might have been your restaurant visits at one point in time, or your travel or something like that. But 2020 in a nutshell kind of looked like that. One of the things that we know for sure, though, is that it was bifurcated. Like there was some good and there was some bad. And the good was the e-commerce went off the charts. Supposedly 2020 was 35% bigger than last year, but I think that number is a lot bigger, which we'll touch on. Buy online, pick up at store or in store. BOPIS just doesn't look as well in print as BOPIS. The delivery was huge, and the behemoths, Walmart, Target, Amazon, Best Buy, those guys have really been off the charts in terms of how the consumer chose to shop. And some of the bad things are profits. Even some of those that we just mentioned, the profits percentage-wise were not as good as they were before, although they are still doing really well. But for many people, the profits sort of fell off the table like that initial chart. Footfalls were way off, which we'll also talk about coming up here. Specialty retail and restaurants really got slammed. I do think, though, that restaurants will be back in that, when you think about it just from a empathy point of view, one of the first places I want to go to when I can take off the mask and go just about anywhere is going to be a restaurant. I mean, I have to go there first. And I think that they're going to pull out of it a little bit quicker than, say, specialty retail or some other entities. The other thing about 2020 is store closures, about double from 2019, almost 20,000 from various different sources. And 2021 is supposed to be even bigger than that. And again, in terms of the store of the future is not only a store, we'll talk about how to handle that going forward. Some say, as you can see the source down there in the lower left, 100,000 more stores will close by 2025. So we're definitely the bubble of store openings from 2019 or in the previous 20 to 30 years before that is over. We're going to have a smaller model, but it's based on what the customer wants to do. This is just some of the companies that went bankrupt last year, and there's some very storied companies there. Neiman Marcus, J.C. Penney, Ascena had Ann Taylor in there. I mean, there was a lot of tragic news last year. And again, back to that very first chart, that's what happened. In 2020 store for the holiday, store traffic was down over 52%. and for good reason. A lot of stores were either closed for 3 or 4 months at the beginning of the year, and also people were definitely staying away. But the other reason is that online sales were kind of off the chart and filling in the gap for many companies across the board. Consumer spending year to year was down almost $600 billion. And, we'll get into the numbers for retail for a second, but it seemed to affect retail a little bit less than it did everybody else, like travel. The airline business is really still struggling, as are many others, hospitality especially. But anyway, just kind of close 2020 out. I love this quote from Winston Churchill because it talks to both sides of those charts, the good and the bad. Success is not final. So if for some of the behemoths, if you think you did really, really well in this past year, I wouldn't rest on my laurels. And failure is not fatal. So some of those companies that went bankrupt have an opportunity to come back and just treat retail a little bit differently and get the customer in front of them instead of behind them or too far in front of them. Let's put it that way. And ultimately, it is the courage to continue that is really going to make us go forward. We just have to also have the smarts with the courage and to do the right thing on top of that. So let's talk about the upside briefly here. I pulled this quote because it was from an executive from a hospital and not a retail executive necessarily, but basically what the statement says is really the way that we need to look at 2021 and 2022. Isn't this a perfect time really to kind of analyze what has happened, where we've been and what we've done, how things that we should have done earlier got accelerated to the point where we got damaged, or maybe even the other way around. We accelerated quickly and we really learned. Let's just not go back to the way that we were doing things before. And if somebody from a hospital can say that right now, I think retail, it's a good lesson for retail as well. So keep that in mind. I mentioned this before, but total retail up year over year, according to NRF, is up almost 3%. That's really encouraging. So people still want to shop. They're just shopping much, much differently. And that's what this Store of the Future presentation, the results that we got, are all about. Buy online, pick up in store, and this is from WD's research. In the last 3 months, 84% of people, when we asked them, 84% had used buy online, pick up at store or in store. So buy online, pick up in store is definitely an upside. And if you didn't move to it before the pandemic, you are definitely there now. And this is from studies that we've done before. We've been measuring buy online, pick up in store, at store for about 6 years now. And when compared to all the other digital retail integration tools, wayfinding, inventory, checkout, endless aisle, all of those elements that make a lot of press, buy online, pick up in store is still number one to the consumer by far in terms of digital retail integration. They want to buy something online and want to go get it at a store. And it makes sense in terms of speed and also control over how you purchase. And you may be out anyway doing one thing or another. So we asked consumers, and we asked 2,600 consumers across the United States to get one vote, like who does buy online, pick up in store best. And box stores right now, you can see 50% of those 2,600 people voted for box as being the best. And that's because they were out ahead of the game, especially people like Walmart and Best Buy. Target a little bit later in there too, but they came on very strong and adapted it even before COVID. And you can see the results right here. You can see grocery and restaurants sort of picking up, but still they're under 20% of the votes, both of them, but stronger than the other categories. And the other categories were sort of left in the dark for quite some time. But box stores, you can see why the box stores and quote unquote the behemoths that we talked about before, you can see why they're doing really well. They're doing buy online, pick up in store really well right now and going forward. That makes a lot of sense. We also asked people like, how do you approve? Do you approve of delivery that you have received or used in the last 3 months? And top two box scores, 98%. So at this point in time, I think I'm going to just explain top two box scores for everybody just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because we're going to talk about it a little bit more coming up. Basically, we give consumers, the 2,600 consumers, a choice of to score something on a scale of 1 to 7. And the top two box scores is 6s and 7% only. So when we asked 2,600 consumers, how would you rate delivery, for example, basically all of them said in the top two boxes, very good or really good. Now, this is another one score, not a top two box score, but you get one vote. So which of the following categories is best for buying online and having them delivered to your home? So e-commerce, basically, who does e-commerce best? And again, box stores going way out in front of everybody. Grocery stores ranked really high, which was surprising for me because grocery is pretty new to e-commerce compared to somebody like specialty stores or even department stores like Macy's. So you can see all their scores really low compared to box scores. And we also did a separate study with Amazon, and Amazon was off the charts compared to this. They were getting up to a 98% approval rating. But box stores, in terms of physical stores, doing very well in this element as well. And then this was a little bit of a trick question that we asked consumers in 2019 as well as 2020. We gave them 4 choices. So you could buy via e-commerce, you could buy versus third-party delivery, so have somebody else deliver whatever it might be to your store, or you could go buy online and then pick up in the store, or you could go shop in the store. And we asked them, how are you going to go forward? 25% of the consumers in 2019 said that they were going to use those other 3 choices and not shop in stores. This year in December, that number was 54%. And we asked them, how are you going to shop going forward? And in some cases, and some of the questions that we asked were also, when this is over, how are you going to shop going forward? So you can see 54% that number doubled within 1 year. And when you consider what happened, that absolutely makes sense. But you have to understand that 54% of people not shopping in stores anymore compared to 2019 is in fact massive, where you might have had 10 people in your store, and now you're going to have 4. We had 40 people versus 100 inside of a big box store. So those spaces that we have been using for retail, whether it's the store itself or the space within the store, is definitely needs to be used for different purposes. Now, this was a top 2 box survey right here, and we asked about dark stores because there was so much publicity about dark stores, and many companies are testing them. But we used each retail vertical there, and we said, how would you rank them? Again, scale of 1 to 7, and these are top 2 box scores. But you can see, I think what's interesting about this is that every single category is pretty similar, between 35 and 48%. And what that tells us is that there's general acceptance across the board for dark stores. The restaurants, you would have to think that restaurants should start to consider it or start to execute almost completely. And a lot of the smaller guys already have, but on a larger scale, it seems to make sense too, because we're talking to a lot of consumers across the country. This is not a small study, but I think one of the things that you can see here too is that when you get to about 40%, and we know this from experience, in terms of top 2 boxes, you should definitely test it. So box stores, drug stores, grocery stores, restaurants definitely need to test dark stores. Dark stores being basically micro-fulfillment centers of pickup and delivery only. When you get to 50% of top 2 boxes, then it will definitely work. And from our experience, when you get to 60%, like we've got to like way over that with buy online, pickup and store, it is definitely going to work, and the consumer is ahead of you. So I think this is an interesting slide to that fact that there is general acceptance for dark stores. Conversely, we also asked them about in-store experience. And when we talked about in-store experience, we listed it as service and wayfinding, checkout, store design, and ambiance as well. So it wasn't just, did I have a good time in the store? It's all of those elements in the store, and still ranks really high. And where consumers, one vote again, saw it necessary most was box stores, grocery, and restaurant, which really makes sense. And I think one of the reasons why specialty and maybe department stores scored a little bit lower is because they are already getting credit for in-store experience, much more so than box and grocery at this point in time. So we've got this going on where dark stores are okay, but if you have a store open, according to consumers, you better have that experience ramped up as high as possible because there's so many options right now. And again, we're in a consumer first mode. So I have to ask, looking at this rendering, is this really the future of retail where you pull up or a drone or an electric car or something pulls up for delivery, a third-party delivery vehicle? There's a place for returns on the left-hand side, but you pull up under one of the stations underneath there. Somebody comes out, puts it in your trunk, and you drive home on your way home from work, or when maybe just on a little short mission to go get something in terms of picking goods up. And I would have to say, yes, I think that's part of the future of retail. So when we talk about the way forward, we're talking about it from a customer perspective, for sure. And one of the things that I think that everybody needs to think about is the mindset of digital first. And that is because that's how the consumer thinks. And from an empathetic point of view, think of what you do when you wake up. What's the first thing you do? You may look at news, you may look for your texts. You think, like, if you're having breakfast, oh, I forgot to order this, I forgot to do that, and you're going to do any kind of shopping, you're going to do it digitally first. If you want to look something up or where it is or what the stores are, you are digital first. So I think companies really need to come around to that fact. There's a lot more to that. And just as a little bit of evidence, these are the numbers just from holiday in terms of e-commerce. You look at Best Buy, that's a big number, almost 250% over last year. Target almost 200% as well. Walmart at 97% over last year in terms of e-commerce is a big number on a big number. But you can see like where the consumer is in terms of e-commerce shopping. And although the number questionably to me was 35% overall, when you start to look at some of these huge retailers, and Walmart's a big piece of retail right now at $500 billion, 97%, I think that 35% number again is pretty low. The other thing that happened because of COVID, but it certainly has trained the consumer to think a little bit differently, is that the use of apps is up over 85%. So you started to think, well, now I have to get something from Target or whoever it might be, or from a restaurant. You download their app and you've got to shop that way, whether it's pickup or whether it's delivery, or whether you want to make a reservation. You can make a reservation, but because of social distancing, it's got to be only at a certain time or shorter periods of time. You downloaded the app. And before, in 2019, there was a lot of resistance to apps, but not anymore. So take those two things into account, digital first shopping and using apps, and then you can see where we get to huge online numbers. But we're going to talk about physical retail. And to us, there's two things, and I think you're going to bear with me because number one is a little bit long. Okay, so portfolio strategy with MFCs, that's micro fulfillment centers, we think is number one. And a portfolio strategy is going to work something like this. And I'm going to talk about micro fulfillment centers for just a second. We're going to go through this fast, and there's going to be a summary slide here. So flexible real estate model, and that is you could use the back of an existing store. You can use a dark warehouse space in neighborhoods. You can use a small warehouse that serves multiple stores just about anywhere within a neighborhood. Then in terms of efficiency, cost, the space is much less than a huge distribution center. Think of Target with a distribution center in Minneapolis, but they could use the back of one of their stores, and they are using the back of one of our stores in my neighborhood. Less to build, 3 to 5 million to build a distribution center or a micro fulfillment center, 50 million to build a distribution center. Less time for full operations, 3 to 4 months, and you're up and running. Better ROI, 2 to 3 years. Extremely productive, 15,000 SKUs a week, which is a big number. So you're looking at a lot of benefits to having a micro fulfillment center for sure. And it's localized data and inventory. You know exactly where somebody is and what they need and what they've bought before. A rapid decrease in the cost of the last mile. As a matter of fact, Target just announced yesterday that their fulfillment option is 40% less cost when an order is shipped from a store instead of from a warehouse. So it's already happening on a pretty grand scale. Faster order fulfillment overall in terms of BOPIS and improved customer retention is the grand poobah right there. And in case you're wondering, you're thinking like, well, how do we do micro fulfillment centers? We have a dozen that we pulled off that are working right now. Ocado is working with Kroger, by the way. And so is Honeywell is working with a number of large companies as well. So dark stores, kind of, the way we envision it could sort of look like this. So pickup and delivery on the left-hand side. If you order something on the way home, maybe you sit out in front and order. If it's a restaurant, you could order some food there still. But the center of the store, or the store itself, or the fulfillment center, the micro fulfillment center, looks like this from a customer perspective, with a board there. Somebody pulls up, John Jones pulls up, John Jones' order is right up on the top there. Somebody runs it out, puts it in their trunk. Or from an urban perspective, it could be simply boxes and lockers, which have already been successful for Amazon like this. The other thing is hybrids. We think hybrids are already happening. They're already happening with Best Buy. They're already happening with Target. Walmart is looking into it as well. And we tested this in a separate study with grocery stores. And what we said was, we're going to take a normal grocery store and make the right-hand side of it a micro fulfillment center, the lower left-hand side an app used to pick up meals, but basically buy online, pick up in the store at the lower right, and also delivery in the lower right, and then shopping, scan and go in the center. And we got a super, super high score. 80% of people said that they would shop there. They could get something delivered during the week, but they could also just go there and shop there as well. So a terrific number for grocery. And back to some of the charts that you saw before, grocery ranked high that way too. And in restaurants, our vision is, in terms of a hybrid, is why not celebrate the fact that a lot of the inventory is going out the front door? Why not make the front door more about delivery and pickup, and make it look really good, instead of have it back there by the garbage and the trash cans in a restaurant off to the side? And this is a model, a little more big box looking, but this is pretty much what Target is doing. Move the back wall up a little bit, make the back a fulfillment center. The front shopping area, you're obviously with a 40%, 50% reduction in the amount of people that are actually coming to the store. You can use that space for other things, like community centers, like restaurants, like testing product, scan and go and pick it up on the left-hand side there, where you see buy online, pick up at store, as well as delivery. So that's a model I think that is really interesting, and an urban version of that here, where you have your micro fulfillment center to the left. And then in experience. So I think experience stores is another part of the portfolio where the experience becomes more about exactly that, where you can see this is a specialty apparel store where you have a coffee bar, you have a little gaming center, you have a hangout, but you can also try on clothes and have them shipped to your house, much like Bonobos attempted to do. And for grocery stores, you could have this meal component in the front here, where there's 3 different types of dinners to get everything that you need when the dinner is at this one section, so that you could go to dinner to dinner to dinner, buy everything that you want and get out, but you could also do buy online, pick up in store. And then how cool would it be if a Best Buy started to look like this, and you could shop each individual product and lounge and test it? So map of Columbus, just as an example, and for somebody that has 15 stores, or you can gradiate it down to 5 stores if you like, but I feel like most of the stores should be dark stores or hybrid stores, and you have 2, maybe 1 experience store where you can really experience and touch the brand, but everything else is delivery. And the smaller ones or the dark stores could be small stores in neighborhoods. So your portfolio starts to look more like this, rather than every store being exactly the same cookie cutter that was predominant 30 years ago. And just one last stat that we pulled from a McKinsey report, that if you can automate these processes, these micro fulfillment centers, at the end of the day, you're going to reduce cost by 65%. Target's already down to 40%, as I illustrated before. So portfolio strategy is dark, hybrid, and experience. And don't forget digital first. And this is a quote from Jack Ma, whose name I forgot to put on the bottom there. But yesterday, don't forget this, yesterday's amazing is today's expected. And I can give you a classic example. I ordered something from Target. They delivered it from the store in 20 minutes. And now the next time I order something from Target, it's going to take an hour and a half, which is really not that much time. I'm going to think, what took you so long? And I think that you can take that up to a lot of different levels. So the second thing, the first thing is the portfolio with MFCs, and the second thing is reorg to the customer. And let's talk about just a second why. So this is a study done by First Insights, and the question to executives and to customers is, do you plan to shop more online this holiday, this past holiday? I think the retail executives said We think that 35% of people will answer yes to that question. Consumers said to the tune of almost 60%. So that delta right there is something that all executives and retailers really need to think about. And then the converse was asked, do you plan to shop in stores? And retail executives said that they thought 59% of consumers said they would shop in stores, but about 40% of them said that they actually would. So a huge 20% delta in the way that retail executives and consumers are thinking. The CEO of First Insights after the study said the customer has changed forever, but the industry does not understand just exactly how much they changed. And I think that's accurate across the board. And that's why digital first, we feel, is a very important component. So to sort of wrap it up, we think that companies are organized like this, and we know this from working with companies. We may come in through the design area and design a store of the future, let's say that has a micro-fulfillment center in the back. And when we have to go through HR and they say, well, you're not hiring enough people, or I don't know how to hire those people, and merchandisers are saying you can't have my space, and on and on and on, going like across from top to top to top, from section to section to section, then silo to silo to silo, then you know that things are difficult, they go too slow, and the consumer is moving twice as fast as you are. We see this as the way forward. We know that some companies that we have worked with are organized like this, where the customer is leading the charge. So if they say, I want buy online, pick up in store, which we know is huge, you have all the components that we listed before within that customer-driven organization until it gets to execution. And if you think of buy online, pick up in store, you think, well, I'm going to execute and put it out in the stores, but you know that a constant improvement would happen on a regular basis, and that division, that section, the BOPIS section, could be there for a long period of time. So the two things are portfolio strategy with micro-fulfillment centers, and if you can automate, obviously you're going to save money. Reorg to the customer, have the customer first, have the customer drive all decisions. And I think most of us know that, but I'm not sure that we're all organized in that manner. And I'm going to leave you with a quote here from Greg: the retail industry must stop reacting to customer behavior and start anticipating it. And I think that that is absolutely true, and the purpose of this conversation. And right now, customers are asking for physical units to do something completely different. And from all of the studies that we've done over the course of the last year and a half, they are giving us permission to do things like dark stores and hybrid stores. But they're also asking us to remember that they are digitally first driven. So thank you very much, and hope to see you guys next year. Have a lovely time.